I usual warm up, and as usual, the routine just helping you to settle in mentally. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. And give yourself that space and time to settle in and you get a kind of bit of feedback from your body and from your movements. If you can see yourself on the screen, which you probably got yourself spotlighted, but you may be able to see a little bit of yourself, but that too. Gradually feeling your hips dropping back and that sort of feeling of opening or dissolving of tightness around the center of your body that allows for the hips to drop, allows for the pelvis to drop. There's a movement in your back and the front of your upper body, fluid quality beginning to develop. Your arms feeling quite heavy, so needing to deliberately pull your arms around. They're not just flopping around randomly. And we can use that image of moving through water to help to define the movement and the connections in your body a little bit. Head resting on top of your spine. And just try and relax any kind of put any kind of attitude in your face. We tend to hold a particular attitude at times, and in particular, I think jaw and lips can tighten up. And sometimes in these arts, we're told just to let the lips part slightly, and that can be quite difficult. A lot of tension can build up here around about the hinge of the jaw, and sometimes that can be associated with tightness around your upper back and your neck. There's a muscle called the sternocleidomastoid, I think, something like that. It goes down from here, it goes down into the chest. So we can think of front and back and upper and lower body and so on and so forth. But if you look at the anatomy of our body, it's very hard to say, well, this is where one part of the body stops and the other one starts. So whilst it can be quite useful to have that sense of compartmentalization, oh yeah, I want to work on this, I want to work on that. We don't want to do it at the expense of the sense of the wholeness of our body, the wholeness of our body and mind. So the backdrop to whatever we do is always that holistic quality, both in terms of the, if you like, the anatomy of the body, the structure, but also in terms of the movement itself. Both are significant. If you were to get a balloon and blow it up, or fill it up with water, it doesn't matter which. And if you could put little sensors around the balloon, you've got a structure there. It wouldn't happen without the material of the balloon working. But then if you were to push very gently on one part of the balloon, the sensors on other parts of the balloon would pick up the change in pressure. And in the same way, if you change something in your feet, then there's a knock-on effect, and you don't always notice it. It's very, very subtle. But one of the things that we do, of course, in Tai Chi is develop our awareness, so that we're just more conversant with this approach that says that we're going to work with the whole of our body. And for me, when one of the old writings says, when one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is in motion, rather than that literally being true, because it's obviously not true here. My feet aren't sliding around, and if they were, this movement would be much more difficult. But if we think of it in that kind of sense of the pressure on the balloon, then it starts to become something useful that we can work with. And then just raising your arms a little. So I've probably done this with you before, but just by way of kind of illustrating that, and in a way it's quite crude, but it's quite interesting. As you stand here, just have your hands in a comfortable position. There's two things you can do as you're turning. I'm going to stop turning so you can see what I'm doing. Just raise your arm up and lower down a little bit, not too much. And just notice, I always notice it here on the side of my body, but there's probably other places as well. But this side might be a good thing to focus on. Do that with both arms as you do this. So that's one set of connections you notice. Notice a change here. I'm not going to describe what I think it should be as your arm moves. So there's one way of understanding the connection. Try and move the whole arm up rather than just bend at the elbow. I suppose you could try bending at the elbow. Actually, that's quite interesting too. But anyway, and the other thing to do is when you've got your arms in a comfortable position is to rotate them, turn them in and down and out. You're rotating from the shoulders, not just the wrist, it's the whole arm. And then just move carefully around that, only as far as it's comfortable, to once again feel changes in the body. And then these are not particularly subtle changes, they're quite obvious, but the exercise actually helps to train you to recognize these things. And then just let your hands drop down. So, reach a little bit forwards in your feet, hips dropping back, soften your knees. And as we were just talking about, for the knees to soften, then the muscles of your legs need to be able to take that load comfortably. And quadriceps at the front of the thigh will be one factor. But as you stand there, try just for instance, deliberately, and do this just on one leg, but so tense up the hamstring muscle and then let it relax. And notice what your knee's doing as you do this. So you know, if the hamstring, for instance, is right at the edge of its capability, then it will start to tense up. And so feel what happens to your knee when it tenses up. So the hamstring's got to be strong enough to take its share of the load without actually creating a problem for the knee in the meantime. And I think really the same is true for the whole body. We sometimes talk about being suspended in this posture. Sometimes that's understood by being suspended from the crown of your head. But imagine being held in some kind of harness. I suppose the sort of thing that you see people getting into when they go bungee jumping. Not that they've been bungee jumping, but so something that's elastic, that's going to allow the body to jump off a cliff edge or something like that for some reason, without actually sustaining impact damage. And in the same way, the muscles, tendons, ligaments of our body, some of them at least, will function in that way. Or if you prefer, a baby in a baby bouncer, and it's got this sort of, you can do that, and you can feel the movement inside, and the muscles are able to accommodate that without tightening up. So just standing there, feeling the stronger part of the body, your legs and your back, front of your body, dropping down a little bit, rib cage dropping down, and then sinking down and pushing up. So part of the challenge here, I suppose you could say, is to maintain those qualities whilst in movement. It's one thing to be able to do that, to find that posture and that equilibrium when we're not moving. But as soon as you start moving, the whole kind of dynamic, I suppose, enlarges it in a way. Because now, for instance, as I think down here, you know, I have to think about what's happening with the relationship between the quadriceps and the hamstrings and the muscles on the sides of the leg and the calf muscle. How are they relating to what's happening in our back, for instance? All of those things will affect our knee, because as soon as we lose the support of the muscles because they've become fatigued or they've just gone beyond their limit, we'll almost have to stiffen up in joints of the body, otherwise we'll just collapse. The knees, ankles, hips, shoulders, elbows, wrists are often referred to as energy gates. I think that's quite an interesting viewpoint. You know, a gate is a passageway through a wall, a barrier of some kind. And if the gate stiffens up, isn't working properly, it's harder to move through. So again, we find that interrelationship of what we think of as, you know, the physical and what we think of as the energetic. They're really very, very intertwined. Moving your arms around in front of you, pushing up and sinking down. Again, as I do this, you know, the movement is this. When I rotate, rotations all the way through the arm. So again, we've got those connections, but also these spiraling movements actually help with the joints and the muscles to release the joints. You get the energy flowing through them. To just sort of like kind of unpick any tightness that we're feeling in muscles and soft tissue. Between them, just generating this flow, the rhythm of the movement, gradually permeating the whole body. If not with this exercise, then with subsequent ones. So this time, change to the wild goose. It's also important not to strain for the movement. So, you know, if your shoulders are aching, or your arms are aching, then, well, two things really. One is, you know, with time and practice, that again, you know, the muscles will condition, but also make sure that you are really using your legs to generate the movement. The hips go up, the arm is pushed up, and your hand rises. Hips go down, and that's reverse again. Here, hip goes up, and then as my hip goes down, it seems to pull my elbow down first of all. And as my hip goes up, it seems to push my elbow out slightly. I'm exaggerating this a little bit so you can see it. This is more felt than seen, I feel. This time changing to parting the clouds. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Movements that involve our arms extending out from or above our body are always a little bit trickier. Beyond a certain point, we often find ourselves approaching that sort of stiff barrier. The more we can become familiar with, say for instance, what's happening in the side of our body as the arm rises, the sort of thing I was talking about earlier, the more sort of resources we have. So if I'm just using my shoulder at this point, then I'm more likely to stiffen up in my shoulder. But if I am actually, so if I'm still going up and down, there's one fairly obvious connection. But even if I'm not rising and falling in my hips, as long as I'm not actually blocking the movement within by stiffening up in my knees and my hips, then I can still experience and work with those other changes within my body. And I've talked a little bit about this idea that what I think of as the external images, moving through water, the bird flying, so on and so forth, produce sensations and qualities that we remember, and the memory itself becomes an image that helps to guide our intent. So if you felt something when we were doing this exercise of turning your arm or pushing your arm up or down, see if you can remember what you felt and use that as an image to try and produce the movement within your body. And to be fair, at first it probably won't work, but it will guide you in the right direction. And then pushing in 4 directions. One more round. And then circling palms. And then if it's comfortable, add in the turn. And switch sides. And the turn. So at no point should anywhere in the body have reached a kind of absolute point of rigidity. Obviously, when you do a turn like this, some parts of the body are extending out whilst others are contracting. Like when you push on one edge of a balloon, one side of a balloon, but not stiff, not hard. And then rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. So this idea of the soft boundary. Remember your hips going back. And then polishing the table. One more time. And then just come back to the standing. And again, we want to feel that rather than having to hold ourselves here, that we're actually being held. We're supported by the ground, of course, but actually being held by the equilibrium of our body. Shake out. Sometimes we draw an analogy with flying a kite. If you've ever tried to fly a kite, and sometimes you can get them just to be in the air. But if you let go of the string, that's not going to happen. And it feels as though you can get to a point where you've got a double string kite. You can just get it to a point where you don't actually register that there's a pull on either hand. But of course there is. But somehow they've kind of neutralized each other. So if you imagine your head as the kite, and that sort of like neutralization, that neutral feeling all the way down through your body, again you get this sense of the upright posture without having to struggle, without having to strain for it. Okay, so still in the parallel stance. So again, the problem is, I mean, with the kite, you're holding it there, and then the wind gusts, and suddenly it's all over the place. As soon as there's any change in position, as soon as there's any movement away from that point of equilibrium, it's much harder to maintain that feeling of equilibrium. So we have two things. We have a physical equilibrium. You know, you could probably measure it if you wanted to. You get a tape measure or whatever. But then you have the quality that the equilibrium gives you, the sort of sense of the movement, the energy, the space, however you care to think about it. And as we move out of the physical equilibrium, we're wanting to maintain the feel of it, which you can do with a kite. You know, the kite can move. If you're really good with the kite, so I'm told, I'm not, yeah, you can just sort of like gently pull a little bit more on one side or another and actually maintain that. But of course, it's a high level skill of kite flying. So just moving from side to side, feeling the changes in your body. I think our bodies naturally seek that quality of equilibrium. Or if that's not quite true, I think what happens is when we do Tai Chi, we create a feeling of equilibrium. We start to get those glimpses of equilibrium, and it's almost as though the body kind of like yearns towards it. Either way, rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to do this with this leg or whatever, in the first instance, just try and maintain that feeling of space within the body and see how your body adjusts. And then what you'll find is things start to go wrong. What I'm finding at the moment, I haven't quite sure why, but as I go across to this side, I'm stiffening up just a little bit around the hip and the buttock, whereas on this side I'm not. So I'm beginning to lose that sense of equilibrium when I'm on this foot, slightly. And so I'm now thinking, as I go in, just put a little bit of extra effort into releasing through my back and hip on that side. That seems to be making a difference. So we do again bring in a quality of analysis, a kind of reductionist approach that says every now and then I'm going to focus on one part of the body, but always with the backdrop of that whole picture. And then just letting your body turn a little bit. Hands in front of you. We're going to do part in the wild horse's mane. So go into your right foot, mirror my movements, turn your left hand palm down, push into your left and turn and let that movement, again you can feel the elbow being pushed out, just sending your hand out, coming back, turning slightly, hold the ball, hands in line with each other, and coming back. And then on the other side, you turn and then push into the right and back. Notice that the arm position at the end of the movement, quite a shallow curve there and a straight line there. Don't start sort of pulling the hand around or twisting it. Imagine your arm is hanging from the ceiling with a loop of cloth around your wrist, and you're just letting it rest there when you do that. It's pretty much, if you look at the position of my arm there, as I push out, it doesn't really change. It rotates out from the hip, of course, from the shoulder rather. But once I'm in position, once I'm in the ball holding position, that angle in my elbow and that line through my forearm and wrist to my fingers doesn't really change. So if you had a cup of tea resting in the palm of your hand, you wouldn't spill it as you did this. Now that will encourage more movement in your weight and in the turning of your body. I'm going to take a slightly wider start because I think you'll be able to see my weight moving more. Now you can see me moving across and then back. And I turn. I'll exaggerate the turn a little bit. That will turn my posture out, but no worries with that. So you can see what's happening in my legs, my torso is the main part of the movement. Part in the wild horse's mane. Do one more on each side. Now come back to the ball holding position. I'm going to bring my feet in a little bit. And now press down with your top hand and the hands slide past each other, stretching between heaven and earth. So you can sink down on this one and push up. You can begin to move the weight, bearing in mind what I said about not losing that quality of movement that we associate with being in equilibrium. Back to the center. Here we have central equilibrium, but as we move across, we want to maintain the equilibrium part of it. Remember, your hips dropping back will help to keep you upright and stable. So that then, again, take this to whatever point suits you, but you can bring the foot in. Have your feet slightly turned out. That can help to just open up your hip. Let your weight flow down through it. And if it suits, raising the leg. Talking earlier about conditioning the legs, I think this is probably quite a good exercise for doing that for obvious reasons, really. So here, your supporting leg, don't lock your knee. Feel that sense of it being held, suspended. Oops. Of course, that probably does mean you'll do what I've just done. If you're really focusing on one thing, you'll probably wobble around a bit more. One more time. And then just bring the feet out. Shake out. Good. Then 1 foot forwards. Notice the width of the step. I haven't done this there. And transferring your weight. Once again, the quality of movement, of change, means that whatever we may feel in terms of equilibrium here, or on one leg, or whatever, when we're not moving, changes. So what's required of your body to neutralize the effect of those of that change is very variable. Too variable, really, I think, for us to consciously control. If you try and control it all, then eventually you'll become very rigid, because what tends to happen if you try the whole kind of mind over body bit is that the bits that are too subtle for the conscious mind to really deal with, and there's many of those, get overridden by, well, okay, I'll, if I can't keep the softness here by allowing the pelvis to make adjustment, I'll just tighten everything up, and then I won't fall over, sort of thing. But of course, again, that tightening, that stiffening, will block the movement itself, and will block the flow of the energy. And then just raising your toes and your heel. Because remember, when we use a term like mind, we're not just thinking about that part of our functioning where we're thinking, oh, right, my foot's doing this, and so on and so forth. It embraces a whole range of qualities, conscious and subconscious, and unconscious, and feelings and images and sensations, emotions. and then stepping in. And we have good evidence to prove to us that our emotions have a physical effect. One of the most obvious being adrenaline, for instance. The emotion of fear triggers the adrenaline cycle, and so on and so forth. But again, it can be much more subtle than that. And on the other side. Raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. And step through. Again, front foot can be turned out slightly if that helps. I find it helps. That little bit of opening creates a space in my hip, a physical space, so makes it easier, more straightforward for my weight to sink down through it, and for me to maintain the orientation of my upper body, sort of looking forwards, and then go in the other direction. And shake out. Move your right foot forwards. So just give yourself a moment with your weight in the middle. So this is again central equilibrium, 50% in each leg, held between the legs, pelvis hanging down. But as we go forwards and backwards, then again we have to allow our body to make changes. There may be times when we need to train our body or to retrain our body to make those changes. There's various ways we can do that. I talked about sort of conditioning the muscles. That's one element. But there's a great deal more to it than that. It's quite interesting. Just going back to this weight change exercise, just this one. Try doing it on a piece of rough ground, because if you're doing it on a flat surface, that's one thing, and that's useful. But try just standing where one foot is slightly higher than another one, and feel what happens. Go really slowly. The point's been made before that some of our ability to deal with unevenness in the surface that we're moving across is being lost, because more and more we walk on flat surfaces. So we don't necessarily go out, and I'm talking generally, of course. I know some of us do, but kind of we can't. We walk on a relatively flat pavement and so on and so forth. So those functions of movement, microscopic movements that involve not just the muscles, but also the sort of the sensory network to receive and to give out instructions, as it were, just atrophy because we're not actually using them. Now just sink back, turn your hands forwards, bird folds its wings. So there may be times when we think, well, maybe I need to work on this or whatever. So for instance, if you're thinking, well, yeah, I'm a bit stiff, and I'm, kind of like you're finding that maybe your stability is being compromised a little bit. Going back to something like stretching between heaven and earth, don't try standing on one leg for any length of time, but stand with a little bit of support from one foot, but your weight mostly on one leg, and see if you can just maintain that position for a little while. It won't be long, but it will, while you're doing that, encourage that sort of development or redevelopment of those changes and how we respond to them. And change to fisherman cast a net. And then pushing away. And then repulse the monkey. And then just stepping in. Extend your leg, plant the foot down before you move the weight. So bring the foot in, sink in the supporting leg, push through. Bringing the foot in as your hand rises, pushing it back as your arm drops down, Pulling it in as it rises, stepping forwards or stepping back as the arm drops down. So you can feel that link between arm and leg through your body. Hand goes up, foot goes up, hand goes down, foot goes down. If I'm deliberately turning my head to look behind, which is another element of this, I generally just leave my toes down. It's quite difficult to turn your head away. You might be able to do it here. Sometimes you can do it. Not that time. Shake out. Put it on the other side. So bird folds its wings. And then fisherman cast the net. Pushing a wave. One more time. And then change. Just remind yourself of that feeling of being held, of being suspended. Check that it's still there. But also maybe notice that just in the process of reminding yourself, sometimes it gets restored. And then with the step. One more round, and so one more on each side. And bring the feet down. Right, just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your arm. Side. Your back. And your hips. Nice on your belly. And shake it. Coming back to standing. So this is central equilibrium. I suppose we could distinguish as I did a little bit earlier between a kind of central equilibrium where we're here, 50-50 in each leg and so on and so forth. And I suppose you might call it even a peripheral equilibrium. Can I maintain that same quality when there's an obvious sort of like lack of symmetry in the body here? There's a little bit of weight there in my leg. But it wouldn't be until I got to here where I regained central equilibrium. So again, two aspects to this nature of equilibrium. One is mechanical, and the other is to do with our experience of it, shall we say, in one way or another. So embrace tiger, return to the mountain, sinking down, pushing up, feeling the pull of gravity, particularly on your arms as you bring them around, and then down into your hips, and feel yourself just being drawn gently back. One more round. And stand. Shake out. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody, as always. So